The wedding planner's voice was ice cold through the phone. "Mr. Marcus, I'm calling to inform you that your family has requested your removal from tomorrow's guest list." I stared at the $50,000 bank transfer on my screen, the money I'd secretly paid for my brother's dream wedding just 3 months ago when he lost everything. My name is Marcus Rivera, and I'm 34 years old. I own 3 successful businesses that most people would never connect to the same guy. There's my catering company, my photography studio, and a wedding venue that books solid every weekend. The funny thing is, I still show up to client meetings with calloused hands and work boots, which drives my family absolutely crazy. I was sitting in my cramped office above the catering kitchen when my phone rang that Tuesday afternoon. The caller ID showed Premier Wedding Planning. I figured it was about finalizing details for my brother Jake's wedding the next day. "Mr. Marcus Rivera?" The wedding planner's voice cut through the phone like a knife through butter. "That's me," I said, shuffling through some invoices on my desk. "I'm calling to inform you that your family has requested your removal from tomorrow's guest list." I stopped shuffling papers. The invoice right in front of me was for Jake's wedding catering. 50 guests, premium menu, total cost $8,000. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "Your attendance is no longer required at the Rivera Thornton wedding. The family felt it would be more appropriate." I stared at my computer screen where a bank transfer receipt was still open. $50,000, sent 3 months ago to cover Jake's entire wedding after he lost his corporate job. My money, my sacrifice, my brother's dream wedding, funded by the guy who apparently wasn't good enough to attend. The wedding planner was still talking, but her words sounded like they were coming from underwater. Something about family dynamics and guest comfort levels. I hung up without saying goodbye. Here's what nobody in my family knows. I've been the invisible hand keeping their lives comfortable for years. When Jake needed a job reference, I made calls through my business network. When Mom's car broke down, I arranged for coincidental roadside assistance that she never had to pay for. Dad's medical bills that mysteriously got reduced by insurance adjusters who happened to be my clients. But Jake's wedding crisis 3 months ago was different. He came to me panicked, saying Rebecca might call off the engagement because they couldn't afford the wedding her family expected. He was looking at McDonald's reception halls and grocery store sheet cakes. I couldn't watch my little brother's heart break like that. So I liquidated some investments, transferred the money to the wedding planner, and told Jake an anonymous benefactor had stepped in. He never questioned it. Too relieved to dig deeper, I guess. The irony hit me as I looked at the vendor list for his wedding. Elegance Catering. That's my company, though it operates under a different name. Captured Moments, Photography, my studio. Riverside Manor, my venue. Jake's perfect wedding was happening entirely within my business empire, and he had no clue. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Marcus, I hope you understand why this is best for everyone. Jake has worked so hard to build his reputation with Rebecca's family." I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Jake's reputation, built on my money, at my businesses, without my presence. See, Rebecca comes from old Connecticut money. Her family drives cars that cost more than most people's houses. When they look at my work boots and paint-stained shirts, they see exactly what my own parents see. Embarrassment. The son who works with his hands instead of pushing papers in some corporate tower. My parents spent Jake's entire engagement apologizing for having a son in the service industry. Never mind that I employ 47 people, or that my businesses generate more revenue than Jake ever made in his corporate job. I'm still just Marcus, who fixes things and gets dirty for money. The wedding was 18 hours away. 150 guests expecting perfect food, flawless photography, and elegant venue service. Everything they needed was mine to give or take away. I opened my laptop and started making a list. I spent the next 2 hours going through every contract, every email, every detail of Jake's wedding. The more I dug, the angrier I got. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger, but the cold, calculating type that settles in your chest like a stone. My catering manager had already prepped the appetizers. Bacon-wrapped scallops, truffle arancini, those little lamb chops that Rebecca's mother specifically requested. The main course was surf and turf for 150 people. My photographer had scouted the venue twice, planning every shot. My venue coordinator had spent weeks arranging flowers, linens, and lighting to create Rebecca's vision of the perfect fairy tale wedding. All of it was mine. Every single piece of Jake's dream wedding belonged to me. Around 6 o'clock, my phone rang again. Mom this time. Marcus, honey, I wanted to call and explain things properly. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the wedding timeline spread across my desk. I'm listening. You know how important this is for Jake. Rebecca's family, they're very particular about appearances. We just thought you'd be more comfortable not having to worry about all that social pressure. More comfortable. Right. Like being uninvited to my own brother's wedding was some kind of favor. The Thorntons are very influential people, Mom continued. Rebecca's father owns 3 hotels. Her uncle sits on the board of directors for 2 major corporations. Jake needs to make the right impression. And I'd ruin that impression. She paused. It's not that you'd ruin anything, sweetie. It's just, you know how you are. Always talking about work, showing up with dirt under your fingernails. Jake has worked so hard to build his professional reputation. His professional reputation. Built on my money. Did Jake ask you to call me? I asked. Another pause. We all discussed it. As a family. Except they'd discussed it without the family member who was funding the entire event. Funny how that works. After I hung up, I sat there thinking about all the times I'd made myself invisible for their comfort. Every family dinner where I changed clothes 3 times, trying to look respectable enough. Every conversation where I downplayed my business success because it made them uncomfortable that their blue-collar son was doing better than their white-collar golden boy. I thought about last Christmas when Rebecca's parents came to dinner. I'd worn a button-down shirt and dress pants, kept my mouth shut about work, and smiled politely while Rebecca's father talked about the service industry like it was populated entirely by high school dropouts and people too lazy for real careers. Meanwhile, I'd paid for half the groceries for that dinner, and Mom had asked me to park my truck around the corner so the neighbors wouldn't see it. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Jake. Thanks for understanding, bro. This means everything to me. Understanding. He thought I understood. I pulled up my business management software and started cross-referencing tomorrow's schedule. Sarah Martinez, my operations manager, coordinates between all 3 companies. She's the one person who sees the full picture of how everything connects. One call to Sarah, and I could shut down the entire wedding operation. But I wasn't ready to make that call yet. First, I needed to think through what would actually happen. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock at Riverside Manor. My venue staff would be there by noon, setting up chairs, testing sound equipment, arranging flowers. My catering team would arrive by 2 to set up the cocktail hour and prep the reception dinner. My photographers would show up at 3 to capture pre-ceremony shots. Without my businesses, Jake had no wedding. Not just a smaller wedding, or a different wedding. No wedding at all. I started doing the math on what it would cost to replace my services at the last minute. A comparable venue in the area charges $15,000 for a Saturday booking. Good catering for 150 people runs at least $12,000. Professional photography starts around $3,000. That's $30,000 in replacement costs, if Jake could even find vendors available on 0 notice, which he couldn't. I know every wedding vendor within 50 miles. Saturday afternoon in June, they're all booked solid. The more I thought about it, the clearer the situation became. My family had made a choice. They'd decided that Jake's social climbing was more important than including his brother in the biggest day of his life. They'd decided that my money was welcome, but my presence wasn't. Around 9 o'clock, Jake called. "Hey, Marcus. Just wanted to make sure everything's cool between us." "Everything's fine," I said, which was technically true. Everything was about to be very clear and very final. "Good. I was worried you might be upset." "Why would I be upset?" "I don't know. Mom said she talked to you and—" "Look, you know how Rebecca's family is. They're kind of old-fashioned about stuff. Social hierarchy and all that." Social hierarchy. My little brother was talking about social hierarchy like it was a real thing that mattered. "Jake, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you know who paid for your wedding?" Long pause. "Some anonymous donor. The wedding planner said someone heard about my situation and wanted to help. Did you ever wonder who that might be?" Another pause, longer this time. "I figured it was someone from Rebecca's family. They have connections, you know. Rich people helping other rich people." I almost laughed. Rich people helping other rich people. If only he knew. "Does it matter who paid?" Jake asked. "I guess we'll find out." After he hung up, I made myself a sandwich and sat in my office until midnight, just thinking. Not about revenge or getting even, but about consequences. Natural, logical consequences. My family wanted Jake's wedding to happen without his embarrassing blue-collar brother. They'd spent months planning around my absence, making sure I wouldn't contaminate their perfect social event. The only thing they'd forgotten to plan for was what happens when the embarrassing brother owns everything that makes the wedding possible. At 12:30, I made my decision. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Sarah's number. One call would end this whole charade. One conversation would show my family exactly what my absence really meant. But I decided to wait until morning. Let them have their final few hours of anticipation. Let Jake wake up excited about his perfect wedding day. Because in about 6 hours, he was going to learn the difference between having an anonymous benefactor and having a brother. Saturday morning arrived with perfect June weather. I woke up at 6, made coffee, and called Sarah Martinez before she had a chance to get distracted by the day's chaos. "Morning, Marcus. Big day today with the Rivera wedding. My teams are already prepping." "Sarah, we need to pull all services for the Rivera Thornton event. Family emergency." She paused. Sarah had worked with me for 8 years, managing operations across all 3 businesses. She knew when I meant business. "All services?" "The venue, catering, and photography. Everything. Effective immediately." "Marcus, this is a 150-guest wedding starting in 8 hours. The food prep alone represents 12 hours of kitchen work. The venue setup started yesterday." "I understand. The logistics, Sarah. Make the calls." Within 30 minutes, Sarah had implemented what she later called the most efficient shutdown in company history. The catering team packed up ingredients that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Bacon-wrapped scallops went back into refrigeration. Prime beef tenderloin returned to inventory. Those custom petit fours with Rebecca's monogram. Donated to the local food bank. My venue coordinator received her instructions while arranging imported orchids. She methodically dismantled the altar setup that had taken 4 hours to perfect. Tables got unstacked, linens folded, sound equipment loaded back into trucks. The fairy tale wedding environment disappeared like it had never existed. The photography team was easiest to redirect. One text message canceled their arrival. No complicated equipment to move, just dreams of perfect wedding portraits vanishing into thin air. By 9:30, Riverside Manor looked exactly like what it was. An empty event space with excellent potential, but zero wedding happening inside it. My phone stayed quiet until 11:15. Then it exploded. The wedding planner called first, her professional composure cracking around the edges. "Mr. Rivera, there seems to be some confusion with your vendors. They're saying the wedding has been canceled due to a family emergency?" "That's correct," I said, sipping my second cup of coffee. "But the ceremony starts at 4 o'clock. We have guests traveling from 3 states. I am aware of the timeline. 20 minutes later, Jake called. His voice carried that specific panic that happens when reality crashes into carefully constructed plans. Marcus, something's wrong with the wedding vendors. They're all saying there's been some kind of emergency cancellation. The catering company, the venue, even the photographers. Do you know anything about this? I set down my coffee. Jake, do you remember asking me who paid for your wedding? What does that have to do with anything? I need to figure out why all these vendors are bailing. The vendors aren't bailing. The owner is making a business decision. Long silence. I could hear Rebecca crying in the background, her voice rising in pitch as she talked to someone about calling her father. Marcus. What owner? What are you talking about? Elegance Catering is my company. Captured Moments. Photography is my studio. Riverside Manor is my venue. Your entire wedding was happening at my businesses, funded by my money, managed by my staff. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. That's impossible, Jake finally said. You run a small catering business. You don't own wedding venues. I own 3 businesses that employ 47 people and generate 7 figures annually. The anonymous benefactor who saved your wedding 3 months ago? That was me. Your own brother. Rebecca's crying got louder. I heard Jake explaining something to her, his voice tight with stress. Marcus, you have to fix this. People are already driving here. Rebecca's family flew in from Connecticut. Her father booked rooms at the Marriott. I tried to attend your wedding, Jake. You decided that would be too embarrassing for your new social circle. That wasn't about you personally. It was just complicated. It's not complicated anymore. You wanted a wedding without your brother. Now you have exactly that. The call ended with Jake frantically promising to call me back after he figured out alternative arrangements. Alternative arrangements for a 150-guest wedding, starting in 4 hours. I spent the rest of the afternoon at my office, imagining the chaos unfolding across town. Guests arriving at a locked venue, frantic phone calls to fully booked competitors. Rebecca's father discovering that Jake's family situation was more complex than anyone had explained. By evening, the wedding had been postponed indefinitely. Jake's relationship with the Thornton family suffered immediate strain, as they questioned what other surprises he'd been hiding. The next morning, Jake called one final time. What do you want from me, Marcus? I want a brother who doesn't hide from my success. Someone who includes me in his life, instead of pretending I don't exist when it's socially convenient. And if I can't promise that, then plan a wedding that reflects who we actually are, not who you wish we were. I never restored the services. Instead, I learned that real family celebrates your achievements rather than apologizing for them. Jake eventually figured that out too, but it took losing everything to understand what he'd thrown away. The strangest part about destroying my brother's wedding wasn't the guilt. It was the complete absence of it. I sat in my office that afternoon, listening to my phone ring every few minutes with increasingly desperate voicemails from family members, and felt nothing but clarity. By 6 o'clock, the wedding that never happened had become the talk of 3 counties. Rebecca's family had driven back to Connecticut in stunned silence. The Marriott lobby became an impromptu crisis center where Jake tried explaining to confused relatives why their formal wear was suddenly unnecessary. My mother called around 8, her voice shaking with rage. How could you do this to your own brother? The same way he could uninvite me from the most important day of his life, I replied, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. This was his one chance with Rebecca's family. You've ruined everything. No, Mom. I just stopped hiding who I really am to make everyone else comfortable. The fallout was swift and predictable. Rebecca's engagement ring came off within a week when her father started asking uncomfortable questions about Jake's family finances and business connections. Turned out the Thorntons didn't appreciate being blindsided by the discovery that their future Son-in-law's support system was more complicated than advertised. Jake called 2 weeks later, his voice empty of the confidence that had carried him through years of corporate networking. Rebecca's gone. Her father thinks I'm a liar and a fraud. Are you? Long pause. I never lied about anything. You just left out the parts that didn't fit your story. What do you want me to say, Marcus? That I'm sorry? That I was wrong? I don't want you to say anything. I want you to decide what kind of man you actually are. 3 months later, Jake showed up at my office wearing jeans and a t-shirt I hadn't seen since high school. He looked younger somehow, like he'd been carrying weight I never realized was there. I've been thinking about what you said, about what kind of man I want to be. I looked up from my invoices. And? The kind who doesn't apologize for having a brother who builds things, instead of just talking about them. That conversation lasted 4 hours and covered 20 years of misunderstandings, family pressure, and the exhausting work of pretending to be someone you're not. Jake never got Rebecca back, but he got something better. He got his brother back, and I got mine. Sometimes the most expensive lesson is the one that teaches you what actually matters.